Good morning, everybody. My name is Richard Lee. I'll be talking to you today about intensive gardening, getting more bang for your gardening buck, making the most use of the ground that you have access to. And this is why I started. That way I can make sure I have people in here. Don't forget to pick you up a handout there, man. I am a certified master gardener. I have been gardening since I was able to walk because my grandfather needed somebody to pick tomatoes that were really low. Helped him with his vegetables, helped my grandmother with her flowers. Occasionally made sure that they didn't cross paths too much, so they didn't cause each other too much trouble. Because my grandfather, there wasn't a plant in it by the time it became planting season, he found a way to put peppers or onions into that flower pot. So we'll go ahead and get started. So what is intensive gardening? Well, intensive gardening is not turning into the great green monster and bulking out and doing everything really, really hard and fast. Intensive gardening is a whole set of different techniques that take and let you make the most use of your space through thoughtful preparation, planning, good organization, and thoroughly working your area. You're optimizing everything that you can to get the most use out of your space. Now, there are a lot of good benefits for intensive gardening because you are going to get some more use out of very limited areas. So if you have a small backyard, you can get more stuff crammed into it and get more out of it throughout the entire year. You get to create ideal plant environments because you can tailor make all of your planting areas to make sure that things are growing in their optimal conditions. You're going to get some better yields for less labor in a lot of cases because these plants, when they're tight, you're not going to have a whole bunch of them in an area. You're not going to encounter as many pest issues because nothing rings a dinner bell louder than a big wide swath of something a bug likes to eat. That's why row croppers have to take and have so many pesticides put down because they're making giant landing fields for all bugs. You can get something growing almost every space. You can have something growing throughout the entire year. You're always capable of pulling the stuff in whenever you're using a lot of these techniques. Oh, and I can't pass this up. The more plants that you want and you cram into your spaces, the fewer weed issues you're going to have. Because if there's not a plant there and nature wants a plant there, nature will put a plant there, whether you want it there or not. So drawbacks, all good things have their downsides. Biggest thing is with a really good, well-planned intensive garden, just like a nice cottage garden, if you're into landscaping, it's going to look a little messy. So if that's not your thing, you may want to do some other planting, but you can work around that. You're going to have to do a lot of hand weeding. So you're going to have a whole bunch of plants in real close together. You can't get tools like big hose or tillers down in there to take and pull those weeds out. You actually got to get down into the weeds. Extended harvest means extended work. You're going to be able to pull more stuff, but you're going to be pulling it over more time. Now, since you're doing intensive gardening, you can also balance that out because you can take and stagger your plantings so that you're not pulling in 700 5-gallon buckets of beans all at once. You can pull those out over the course of the entire season. You can also take and make sure that you're mitigating a lot of other vegetables that way too. Anybody ever got more peppers than they could pick? Those things will go prolific and nuts. It's really good to take and stagger them out. Initially, there's a lot of work up front in this, either labor-wise or planning-wise. Depending on what you decide to do, you're going to have some cost issues possibly. It just depends on how intensive you want to go and how perfect you want to make everything. So intensive gardening, we're going to be talking about some tools of the trade. This is going to be things like relay planting, succession planting, and intercropping. These are the 3 P's. These give us what's known in some circles as polyculture, or taking and putting many different plants into one space and letting them kind of sort themselves out how we want them to. We're going to have some techniques. So we're going to talk about some square foot gardening. We're going to talk about vertical gardening. If you've never heard or seen that. Of course, we're going to talk about one of my favorites for like small spaces, and that's container gardening. And then all of this is going to have to be considered with how the plants are going to interact, what nutrients they need, the sun shade conditions they tolerate, how much water they have to have, what their growing seasons are, and what their favorite growing conditions are. So first off is relay planting. Who here remembers running relays in grade school and high school? So you sit there and just keep handing the baton off, and you're doing it in intervals. So we do the same thing with relay planting, and you can see it really, really well in this picture here with this lettuce. This is the first set. 2 weeks later, you put out another set. 2 weeks later, you put out another set, and you have everything coming in sequence over a period of time instead of all at once. You get more use out of the space because you're not overwhelming yourself with what you can take in. You're also taking and hedging your bets against any weather conditions or pest conditions that might have occurred. Because maybe we go 2 weeks without rain and it puts a dent in the first crop that you did, but then we get some nice weather for the next 2 weeks. So this next set will take to be growing well without stress. The other type of relay planting that you can do is stacking plants of different maturity rates. And that's just things that take and ripen out at different times. Most people are familiar with this on tomato plants, but it happens with other plants as well. For staggering, just make sure you're planting your rows in 2 to 4 week intervals. The easiest way to do this is to take however much space you're wanting to do with the plants and just divide those rows out so you'll feel comfortable staggering them out. So if you're wanting to do 6 rows of beans, do 1 row this week, do another row 2 weeks from now, and just repeat that process until you got all 6 out. Now the really cool thing about that, if you want to go real crazy, by the time that first row comes into harvest and it starts putting out, if it's a bean that has a peak, so if it's a whole bunch of bean pods, you can collect all of them but they didn't do nothing, you can rip those out and put it in your next row of beans. So you can just kind of conveyor belt it back on. And beans, usually 60 days on maturity, so you can take and have those growing out and setting out throughout the entire summer and into the fall. In the spring and the fall, you want to make sure you're accounting for the plants having cooler temperatures to work with. That will take and slow up their germination rates. You also want to make sure you're accounting for any dry spells. If you put out a row of seeds, those seedlings, until they get established, have to have moisture. So you want to make sure that you're keeping them well watered. And anytime you are watering, make sure you're watering very slowly and very deeply, because the longer the period of water you put down, the smaller trickle, the better it soaks in, the better the plants are able to take it up later. Because it's not just all sitting there on the surface ready to evaporate, it's sinking down to the subsoil. But there's one thing clay does wonderfully. Whenever you get it wet, it stays that way for a while. Once the plants start flagging, you can set out more or you can swap to something else. Since we're coming up on that time of the year, for the end of this growing season, so fall, the best way to figure out what your last possible planting time is on something is to follow this formula here. Our average first frost around here is October 15th, or if you're like me, I use October 14th because that's my anniversary. I managed to get 2 birds killed for the price of 1. You take and then you figure out the days of maturity after planting. So we're using a set of beans that takes and comes up about 50 days here. You'll add 10 days to that, and then you subtract it from our first frost, and that gives you the last planting date of August 15th. Now, for some plants that can take more cold, you can take and go a little bit past that. So all of your leaf greens, carrots, brassicas, so things like collards and broccoli, they can take the frost pretty well, so you can go past that date some. The big thing with all of them is to make sure they've got 2 or 3 sets of good true leaves on them. They'll survive a lot better that way. Then there's a lot of stuff that you can do to staggered planting. I mean, there's a huge list. Anything that's going to have a peak harvest time, you can take and do this way where you're just setting it out in sequence. And it's pretty much good across the board. A lot of your greens, cold season crops, so your spring and fall vegetables work really well this way. So arugula, basil, several of the herbaceous herbs, they can do this nicely. Chicory, cilantro. Cilantro is a really important one in our area to make sure that you're doing with this staggered relay planting, because it can go to seed very, very quickly, and it starts going to use that in any of the foods that you're wanting to pick, especially if you like doing salsa. Now, some people admittedly do not like cilantro, but I have a benefit for you, cilantro, if you don't eat it. Cilantro is a great trap plant. Most of the bugs in your garden are going to cause problems across all of your plants. So my number one enemy, aphids, they take and they'll hit that cilantro first, because they'll go in there and it's like, hey look, this is an easy target, it's got lots of nice green growth, and they'll hit it, and then they'll set off your other plants, and since you're already staggering out that cilantro plant, you can just rip those infested plants up and trash them. Or if you really, really want to feel cathartic, you can burn them. And then there's same vegetable, different maturity rates. This is just taking and checking packets to see when plants mature with their harvest times, and then accounting for that in your staggered planting. So these plants you can put out all at once, but they'll come in at different times. Tomatoes are really good about this. Cabbages and lettuces are pretty good. There's several different maturity rates on beans. There's a little change in variance in carrots. The wider your selection of those cultivars, the better and easier it is on them. Squash has a remarkable amount of maturity rates in it. Kale is another good one. There's some variation across their various cultivars as well. Have you a cool little planting plan right here. We'll start with the tomatoes. So you can take and get all 4 of these cultivars in the spring, and you'll be able to pick tomatoes the entire summer without having the same plants. So it puts you out some early girls, they'll be ready between 50 and 60 days after transplant. And then not long after that, Park Swappers, which are a good slicing tomato, they'll be ready 65 to 70 days. Towards the end of the summer, you can get you some Cherokee purples. Make sure to pick those while they still got some green on the shoulders, because you don't want them ripening the purple. And then 90 to 100 days out, you got a big old-fashioned sliced tomato in the form of brandy wine. They're not a heavy producer, but they make big fruit, and they come out real late, so you can get some good late-season tomatoes. And if you want to fill in the gaps through here, you always have to fall back to the various cherries, because you cannot keep those things from producing. They are the toughest tomato plants I ever get to handle. They also reseed real easily in our area. So you'll find little volunteers here, there, and yonder throughout your garden every once in a while if you don't do too much tilling. And then on the squash front, who all here knows that zucchini is a squash? Good job. This particular cultivar is Black Beauty. It's a dwarf plant. It usually gets no more than 3 by 3, which if you're familiar with growing squash, that is really small for a squash plant. They usually mature out in 45 to 60 days, and that's actually after you take and put them out by seed. So they'll come out pretty quickly once you start with them. Yellow crooknut, everyone's familiar with the famous yellow summer squash. If you're not, you should be. Grow some. Go visit these nice people out here at the farmer's market and get you a few. They taste delicious. They're really good breaded and fried. You can even take and make squash bread out of them, and they still taste really, really good. And then we have Walton butternut right here. There's a fella who's got some out there today. They mature at 90 to 100 days. They are a winter squash. They are good for long-term storage through the course of the winter. So you can take and grow them out, and you can get them going. They're nice and hard. You put them up in cool, dry storage. They'll last you for a couple of months. You can take and have semi-fresh squash that you pick from your own yard right around New Year's Day still, if you take the time out everything right. Because that 100 days, that means your last run usually goes in the middle of July on them. If you're wanting to really stack stuff out, and you can take and pick them just as the frost is starting to come in. Those plants usually can handle a little bit of cold too, so you don't have to get too much of a rush. If I didn't mention it earlier, which I don't think I did, if you have any questions, feel free to stop me. different vegetables in succession. Now this is what a lot of people are familiar with whenever you're thinking about intensive gardening. And this is how we try to take and plan out 3-season gardens in our area. You start off with one crop in the spring, so you start off maybe with broccoli, and then over the course of the summer you swap out and do some beans, get that soil really nice and nitrified with all those bacteria that hang out on the bean roots. And then in the fall you get something in to take advantage of that. So we plant out some leaf greens in the form, in this case, oak leaf lettuces. And they'll take and suck up all that nitrogen and grow nice and big and fast. You can do this with practically any crop. You just have to make sure that it's things that aren't going to cause problems with each other. I probably would not take and do onions followed by beans, because those onions, they can take and kill off the bacteria in the soil that you need for your beans. But you could take and do onions followed by tomato plants. You can follow those tomato plants up with, let's see what's something good for the fall, with kale, give it a little bit of nitrogen. You either do a late run of beans, if you put in early tomatoes like Early Girl, that are petered out. There's lots and lots of options there. It's just moving everything in and out. And then there's intercropping. This is a really nice technique. It involves an old skill here in North America called Three Sisters, which is the excellent example of it. If you're not familiar with Three Sisters plantings, it goes like this. You take and you pile up some soil in a circular mound. You take and you sow some corn out through there. A little while later you sow some beans, then sow some squash. The corn grows up. It gives the beans something to grow up. The squash grows out and it covers the ground and keeps your weeds suppressed. The corn gives a little bit of shade to the beans and the squash. They don't stress as much. The beans, as they're growing, gives nitrogen to the squash and the corn, which we're all familiar with how much nitrogen corn can suck up. And then everything stays cooler, so the ground stays wetter, it's a little bit more moist in there, everybody grows better, and at the end of the year, you harvest out everything, and you're good to go. You have a nice little mix of plants that they can feed you through the course of the winter, or even just through the summer. You have in this picture here, you got corn where instead of doing beans, they did clover. Clover is great for a cover crop / intercropping mix. In this picture, you've got two different legumes stacked on each other. You have green peas, which don't take the heat once it gets hot, but already coming up in between them, we have some bush or pole beans coming up. That way they can take and just continue that on. You could even take and swap those out where maybe you're doing some corn afterhand, or maybe if you want to try your hand at making your own molasses, you got some sorghum in there. Take and do squash because they'll like nitrogen because they want to get good and big. You can do cucumbers. This is a bed that I did a couple of years ago. This is a raised bed done with a square foot gardening method. It's done with Three Sisters planting. I've got corn, and you can just see some of the beans coming up in there. I've got 3 different cultivars in that particular bed besides the corn. And all those beans are coming up in between the corn. They'll eventually be able to lean over on the corn and grow up it. And on the outside edges, to kind of keep everything at bay, I've got some zucchini and squash growing in. Now, there's one very important thing I would like to share with you about Three Sisters gardening and growing beans and among your corn. And it's a lesson I had to remind myself of the hard way. Don't do this with pole beans. I highly recommend doing it with bush beans. If you do it with pole beans, they climb really fast, they get really thick, and then you have a nice windstorm come through. And that wind is that big mass of green and just starts laying stuff over to the side. The good news is the beans grow so fast as that happens, you can kind of ride everybody up, and then they'll start getting each other together again. I got lucky on that one. So some good intercropping examples, radishes and broccoli together. They have different heights that they take up because the broccoli is going to get nice and tall, about 1.5 to 2 foot. The radishes are going to stay about 6 inches fully mature. arugula and leeks. Arugula is a low-growing leaf vegetable. The leeks are going to have some nice, tall stems with leaf coverage, just a little bit of shade. Peppers and spinach. If you grow spinach underneath the peppers will give the spinach some shade. They'll be able to take the heat better. They'll keep that ground covered. They're not going to be overly competitive for moisture because the peppers like it a little bit drier. The spinach will take and suck up some of the extra water and help everybody out. Tomatoes and basil. You can grow your basil plants in and around your tomato plants. It improves the flavor, kind of keeps some of the pests off because a lot of flies and some aphids don't like basil plants. And if by chance the aphids and other bugs decide to hit your basil, basil grows really fast. So you can go in there and cut it back real hard, throw away all that diseased material, like what we were talking about earlier with cilantro, and the plant will just take and flush right back up. Whenever you're thinking about doing intercropping, that's what you're looking for. You're looking for plants to take up different spaces in the garden. You're looking for plants that complement each other somewhat, so maybe one provides shade for another one that doesn't like as hot. Maybe one provides some disease resistance, some pest deterrent or resistance. And there's some really good information online, and I'll have some links to show everybody here later. This also brings us into companion planting, because intercropping runs right into it. So companion planting is planting plants together that complement each other in some way, shape, or form, or multiple fashions. Sometimes they'll give other benefits to their plants, like beans providing nitrogen for your corn. Sometimes they'll provide some pest deterrent. So if you'll take and grow carrots and onions together, the onions will help keep some of the carrot flies off, and the carrots will help keep some of the onion flies off. So they kind of cover each other with their big pests. There may be some other benefits that have yet to be scientifically proven. We all know how that goes occasionally. Whenever we're talking about gardening, everyone's got their anecdotes about everything. And then there's some stuff that grandma and grandpa got taught by their grandmother and grandpa, and it's always worked. No one's for sure why, and they just know that it does. So if you know any of those things, keep them in mind and run with them. One of my favorite plants to kind of put in around the garden that makes the garden prettier is yarrow. It looks a lot like a pretty Queen's Anne's lace. So instead of having a white flower, it's usually got pastels or yellows. We have a yellow one out in the butterfly garden out here. It can take and give some nice ground cover to an area. The flowers are really small. They attract parasitic wasps that keep down various pest insects, because those parasitic wasps, they'll take and predate on caterpillars like tomato hornworm. They'll go in there after aphids. They'll go in there after other bugs. The foliage is said to improve the oils in various fruit plants, so making them stronger. So it's a good little plant. And then the leaves break down really, really fast, so you can add them to compost and get compost growing pretty quickly. Got a little short list here for you of some good companion plants. Catnip, put it out in your borders. It's good for keeping away flea beetle, which is a wonderful pest we have in our gardens this time of year. It'll attract bees because they'll come to the flowers and get in there, and they'll go, oh look, here's some pollen, and they'll float on over to the beans and pollinate them. Chives. I was talking to a fellow a little bit ago about that. It can help keep down some fungal issues. It'll also help with aphids. They're good around apple trees, carrots, roses. Chrysanthemum has a lot of really good properties as a pest deterrent that actually make two pretty strong pesticides out of various members of the chrysanthemum family. Borage is good around your squash and strawberries and tomatoes. Again, they'll attract lots of bees, which helps you with pollination. They're also going to take and help deter some hornworms. They're going to have small flowers, so we're going to attract more of those parasitic wasps that we're wanting in the garden to control some of our pest issues. Basil around asparagus and tomatoes. Basil repels flies and mosquitoes. So if you're having issues with mosquitoes or flies getting in your house or bugging you while you're outside, just plant some pots of basil around. In your kitchen, you can take and grow a little terracotta pot of it in the windowsill. It does really well that way. And if you want, here's a good trick for you. Basil roots really easily. All you have to do is make you a cutting that's got 2 sets of leaves on it, nip off that bottom set, and put that cutting down into a glass of water. Within about 4 to 6 days, it should have roots just starting to kind of stream out of it. Once you get some good root growth on there and you get a little top growth coming on again, you can take and plant that in the soil. And if you want to save yourself from having to grow basil from seed, towards the end of the season, you can go in there, trim off some of your basil, start it out in cuttings, start growing it in the house for the winter. And that next spring, you can make some more cuttings off of what you had, and you can take and spread some more plants out throughout the yard. So raised beds are a really good way to take and build and get the most out of your space. There are several different types of raised beds. Everybody's familiar with one where you go out and get some boards or anything that takes and holds the soil together and lifts up and builds you up a mound. I personally prefer using Eastern red cedar because it does not rot, and very few things are attracted to it because of all the resin. You can use black locust if you've got that available to you. These folks had a whole bunch of whip stakes that they took and they wove together, kind of make a wicker basket around their bed. You can use cinder blocks, you can use stray bales, straw bales, anything that holds the soil in together and lifts it up. But there's even a simpler way to take and do a raised bed, and that's where you go through and you take your soil and your plots and you pull it towards the center of a space, and you get yourself a little mound about 2-3 foot across. You just have that soil built up, you go in through there, you put some compost, maybe a little extra soil, maybe put in some plant refuse that you had left over from spring and winter. Maybe you take and you pull all of the leaf litter out down through there and put some soil in on top of it. And let that break down, make you some good rich stuff to grow in next year. And then you can take and over the course of the summer it will settle down, so it will wash out. But it gives you some nice concise places to put in your rows. You can really play with what your soil looks like in raised beds, especially if you go for one like this where it's lifted up. Anyone here heard of Mel's Mix, the square foot gardening? Mel's Mix is a really great soil medium. It requires you to get peat moss, vermiculite, and compost, preferably of up to 5 different kinds. So you get a really nice mix of things. And that gets really expensive really quickly, because a 4x4 bed at 4 inches deep takes a half yard of material to fill up. And that's going to be about 14 40-pound bags of stuff. You have to take and get all that mixed together. And if you haven't priced bag goods recently, peat moss is about $13-15 for a 2 cubic foot bale, which is about 50 pounds worth of peat moss. Compost can run anywhere between $2 to $10 a bag. And vermiculite is currently about $30 for 4 cubic feet. So that's weight is about 20-25 pounds. Because vermiculite's light. You get a lot of bulk without a lot of weight in it. Using raised, I neglected to mention the type of raised bed. This right here is what's known as a hugelkultur bed. In our area, it may not work so well sometimes unless you really play with it. But what a hugelkultur bed is you take a whole bunch of woody material of all different sizes. You gather it together, you dig a trench, you throw it in there. And on top of all that wood, you then throw all sorts of compostable material, manure, good compost, throw in all that topsoil you dug out. If you need to, bring in a little bit more. And as you're watering all of that mess, that wood slowly starts soaking up that water. And it just soaks up more and more and more because if you ever picked up a wet log, it holds a lot of water. And it's all underneath the ground. The plants will take and root down in there. As the soil dries out, they'll pull the water out of those logs. The longer that mound is there, the more beneficial soil microbes and fungi you get in there. They extract water out of that wood and send it out to the plants. And you can have this be pretty tall. A lot of recommendations tell you to have it about as high or a little bit higher than what you can reach out in front of you. So for me, that'd be a pool bed about 5 feet tall. So you've got these nice steep sides, so you don't have a lot of places for anything that you don't want to grow there. You can see everything nice and easily. Gives a wind break. It takes and warms up nicely and quickly, so you can get seeds growing faster. You can even plant trees and stuff in there. They're a really awesome way to do a raised bed, especially if you have a lot of wood material you're trying to do something with. You don't want to take and throw it into the landfill.
I live in the middle of cedar.
Cedar will soak water. It's not going to break down real slow. I probably won't use too much of it because to get the full benefit out of these hugel beds, you want wood that's actually going to break down. So maple will work really, really well. Poplar, if you put it in small enough pieces or get enough little bits, it'll work well. Basswood, you finally have a good use for mimosa tree. Besides looking at it and going, that'd be nice if it wasn't invasive. Because you can cut that wood and throw that in there and it'll break down and rot nicely. Whenever you're doing these types of beds, you're breaking up the work a lot because you're making sure that you have all these nice little condensed spaces that you can plant in. Makes it easier to plant.
What's the name of that again, Hugel?
Sorry, German sometimes gets me. Hugelkultur. It's spelled Huglekulture. If you go in there and if you look up Hugel beds, you usually will find it up really fast. I found this wonderful picture real quickly by typing raised bed mounds, and it brought up a whole bunch of them. And that may be easier to remember and write down than Hugelkultur. With raised beds, there's a very wonderful subset of raised beds called square foot gardening. Square foot gardening is a whole little technique that combines a whole lot of the other stuff we've talked about. Because once you put a whole bunch of plants into a small area anyway, you're measuring everything out to where you're only putting in a certain number of seeds in the space to make the most out of what you've got. You're planting a wide assortment of things, so you're keeping down your pest issues because the bugs can't find their preferred target in that large mess of field. You have a lot of plants in place, so you're keeping your weeds down. And you might be having a pretty decent crop rotation in there because it's really easy to pull stuff out of the beds because this is where that Mel's mix gets used. That Mel's mix, if you've ever ran your hands through a really, really good potting mix, it's like that, but you don't have any of those little perlite pieces, that little like styrofoam stuff, and it feels more like soil because you got all that compost in there. Really good technique for doing tight spaces in yards because it's a very malleable form because all you need is like a 1 square foot block and you can stack those however you want to as long as you can reach across them real easy. So you never want to go more than 3 or 4 feet deep on a raised bed because you don't want to have to take the step through it. Because one of the benefits of doing a raised bed is you're not trampling your soil and compacting it so hard that making it hard for plants to get their roots through. It's got a wonderful little book that's in its 2nd printing. It's been out since the early 80s. It's called the Square Foot Gardening Book. And the one downside is that if you do Mel's mix, it does get expensive fast. So I have a shortcut if you intend to do a lot of beds. And the shortcut is very easy. You take and you find a nursery you like. You go, do y'all have mushroom compost in bulk? They should probably say yes. You take that and then you get some pine fines. So anybody not familiar with that pine bark nugget mulch, it's like half the size of your hand. It's like shingle pieces. Used to get used to playgrounds a lot. Back in the early 90s, you'd see the people's flower beds because it made a pretty good mulch. It's that chipped down into confetti, the pieces about as big as your pinky nail. And it's a really fine material. You mix those two together, it gives you a really loose, loamy mix that you plant right into. And you can fill these beds up with it. And at the nursery I work at, a yard of that stuff, so two 4x4 beds worth is $41.43 after tax. So you get a lot of material fairly inexpensively. Last time I helped somebody get together bags sold per bed that size, their bill ran about $140. So it's a big difference.
What is that, on that, what's that material that's making the grid? What kind?
This right here, to me, that looks like some sort of Latticework strips, or where they're doing edging. I can't remember the name of it. But you know that little thin edging you'll put around your door jambs? But you can do that with string, you can do that with little slats of wood, you can do that with old edition blinds. You can do that with old 4x4s that you stripped out. You can even do it with old hose.
Okay.
If you want to get really, really experimental, you can do it with PVC pipe that you drilled some small holes into, and then you connect that to a hose bit that you can screw into, and you can use that to water your plants and grid everything out.
Okay. Let me try that.
Around this bed, they have some wire to keep the cat and the dog and probably the rabbits out, because that's the only reason I would think to have all of your plants that close together, especially with your containers. Because if you've never had rabbits get in your garden and wreak havoc, those little hoppers, they taste good mixed with the vegetables. This is basic guideline for how to figure out your plantings. This is really good for doing other sort of type plantings on your plants. Anything that wants to be 12 inches apart, so any of your bigger plants like broccoli, tomatoes, cabbage, your pot peppers, your bell peppers, they want about a foot apiece for themselves. So you want to make sure that any one given square foot, you only got one of those plants. Then anything that wants to be 6 inches apart, like chives or celery, kohlrabi, you take and you can put 4 of those in there. And kind of just poke them out in your little grid. For medium plants, so this is going to be beans, you can take and do peas this way, beets, spinach, most of your leaf greens, except for the real tiny stuff. They want to be 4 inches apart, you put 9 into a square. For the really little guys, or the things that don't take up a lot of footprint individually, like carrots and radishes, you can take them and you can put them in there 16 to the square. So that means a standard 12-inch wide pot, you can get 16 carrots growing in there. Your loose soil, like what you do in a container garden, or you having a raised bed, is much better around here for doing carrots. They dig in a lot easier. If you want a good root vegetable for our clay soil, radishes and turnips, you can't go wrong, because they'll just bulldoze their way through the place. They're really good about making some space. Scallions and arugula, green onions you can do this way. Put them real tight to the space. Container gardens. Container gardens are great because everyone likes to put pots of something out on their patio, out on their porch, on their sidewalk. You can take and get a lot of stuff in there. You're limited on some cultivars because you want stuff that's going to stay small or be easily maintained with a smaller size. You're going to have a smaller yield because, of course, you have a smaller space. You're not going to have as much stuff in there, but you're going to have a wide selection of things. Like these folks went through and they made themselves an entire little salsa garden right there in that pot. You got tomatoes, you got peppers, a few different types of basil, you got some chives, and there's some oregano right here. It has some cilantro sort of mixed in there towards the center where it gets some more shade. And it's really good that way. Anytime you're doing container gardening, we are talking having to do more water because water is going to run through them, and it's better than water staying in them. Now you can mitigate this out by doing self-watering containers. There's some really good guides online that you can look up that talk about how to make your own self-watering containers. You can also buy them. The basic mechanics of it is, though, you have 2 pots set on top of each other. You have a riser at the bottom of the lowest pot. There's some holes in the top pot that you can take and put some soil down through with some sort of mesh screen around where the soil sticks into the water. And then you have a little pipe that comes up that you can fill the bottom pot up with, and then you have an overflow point in that pot. So if it gets too, water gets too high, if it's rained really heavily, you don't have excess water sitting there drowning your plants. Then as that soil up top dries out, water likes to take and go to drier places, so that water starts moving up into the rest of the pot. So it wicks it up at the bottom. And that's a really good way to keep your soil consistently moist without having to worry about drowning your plant. Because that's the same principle that we were talking earlier with hugelkultur beds. You can do the same thing with sinking terracotta pots that you've sealed up all the drain holes in. You can take and fill them up with water, put their saucer on them as a lid, and as that soil dries out, that terracotta soaks up the moisture and moves the moisture out into the soil as the soil dries. There's a fancy name for that particular system and that particular pot. It's called an Oya. That's O-double-L-A. They're essentially little round basins that have a small opening at the top. You fill them up with water. They usually hold about 1.5 gallons, 2 gallons a piece. And they just take and slowly soak that water out and surrounding the soil. There's lots of ways you can mitigate that moisture loss throughout the day without drowning plants. Important thing about tomatoes, you can put a lot of other stuff in with the tomato plants. Don't put more tomato plants in with the tomato plants. I have had way too many people over the years find out this the hard way. You really don't want more than one tomato plant per 14 inches of container because they will drink a lot of water. So they're usually best off one tomato per pot and then plant some other stuff that you want in there. Because those tomato plants will just drink as much water as you can give them, and sometimes they'll drink even more than what you think you need to put on there. And then they start getting too dry, you get blossom end rot issues, you get cracking issues, the plants look sick and sad. You just want to make sure that you're taking them and giving them plenty of room so they can layer out. One other last good thing you can do with a container garden, take a 2-liter water bottle, take and fill it up, put a lid on it, put it in the freezer, let that freeze. Whenever it's frozen and you know you need to put some water on your plants, you can take that 2-liter bottle out, take the cap off, put it opening inside down into the soil, and as it slowly melts, it'll start soaking out into the soil, and it'll water the soil that way. And it's a really good, easy way to take and reuse your 2-liter bottles and take and make a little bit of cooler space around the plants and make sure that they get plenty of water. Because 2 liters of water slowly trickled out throughout the day is actually a lot of water for most plants. Vertical gardening, as far as the downsides and whatnot, and some of the special needs for vertical gardens are, they're pretty much container gardens. The benefits are you're going to get to make use of spaces that you don't really usually get to use. So you can make good use of your fences, you can make good use of the size of your deck, the size of your house. Plants are going to be right where you need them, so you can pick them at whatever your height is that is most comfortable, because you don't have to bend over because they're sitting right here in front of you, just like in that Google bed. The pests are going to be confused. They're going to be confused for 2 reasons. Reason 1, you've probably got a whole bunch of different things in there. Reason 2, a lot of pests want actual soil to take and live part of their lifespan in. You're not giving them actual soil to live part of their lifespan in. You're giving them like a small amount of peat moss that you're taking and keeping watered, or a very light, airy soil mix that's easy to hold moisture in. Because weight is a big consideration with these, because you want to make sure that they're not so heavy, whatever you're using to anchor them to your structure is not going to hold it. So you want to make sure you got really good anchoring in there. You don't want it to be too terribly heavy. Because remember, 1 gallon of water weighs 8 pounds, and soil can hold a lot of water. You're going to have less rot and mold on the fruit because it's not laying right on the ground. It's not even laying near the ground because it's nice up and high. And you can grow lots and lots of things this way. You can grow lots of ornamental stuff this way. It's a really nice way to spruce up the wall but you have nothing else to do there. But you're not just limited to things that you can hang off the wall when we're talking about vertical gardening. There's some stuff that you can take and go vertical with. A good example is cucumbers. You can grow cucumbers up a trellis. It is the easiest way to grow cucumbers and not have to worry about missing any fresh cucumbers you're going through. And it gets them off the ground, less issues with powdery mildews, dry out easier. The leaves don't become as infested with various other problems they might have. And they've got tendrils on them to hold on to stuff anyway, so they'll just run themselves straight up a trellis. And you can actually do a lot of other vining plants this way. You can grow squash up a trellis. You can grow some melons up a trellis. It's very rare that a fruit-bearing plant that's going to have something that looks like a melon or some sort of hanging fruit isn't going to have a vine strong enough to hold it in place whenever it starts ripening up on there. And if you are concerned about it, get you some cotton handkerchiefs, old strips of shirts. You can make little hammocks for everything and take and put that up underneath that melon, tie it off onto the trellis, and you're good to go. This is also a really good thing to take and do with tomato plants if you're not used to growing them up in a cage or on a trellis or something. Normally growing them out across the ground or letting them kind of bush out and just kind of cage them in with string. Much easier to take and grow them up a trellis of some sort. Now, that trellis can literally be made of anything. If you're going to do something with metal, I would recommend that you try to get something that's going to grow pretty fast up it. That way it's shading that out so you don't have to worry about it burning plants. And then, since we're talking about stacking functions, cucumbers, something you can do with your cucumbers, instead of having that trellis go straight up, have it lean with the north side being in the shadow, and then you can take and grow your lettuces underneath that, and it gives them some shade. You still have your cucumbers off the ground, and you can still get some lettuce through the course of the summer, a little bit later than what you normally would, because once it starts getting hot, those leaf greens, they start bolting, going to seed, and they start tasting bad. So planting, this is the crux of doing intensive gardening, because the more you plan, the better everything's going to go for you. The fellas from the At Home show with David Bates, and I can't remember Josh's last name at the moment, they have a saying they say on the show all the time: if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. It's a very true statement. So you should start planning the next year's vegetable garden as early as possible. I would try to start doing it no later than January. But right now, while everything that you did this year is fresh in your mind, everything that you like eating, everything that you had troubles with, you can start planning with that right now for next year. That way you know how intensive you want to do, what all you want to grow out, what all you actually will eat that you're growing. You can go ahead and start laying out your beds, get all your necessary materials gathered, so plenty of seed catalogs. If it's cold already, get you something nice and warm to drink. I like hot chocolate. Be sure to do a soil test for using the actual ground, because you want to make sure you know what you're having to add to that soil, whether it be gypsum, whether it be lime, whether it be going through and mixing a whole bunch of extra compost. And getting that in the fall is the best, because that gives it the entire winter to do what it's supposed to in the ground. Really important for figuring out whenever it comes down the line, what am I growing? So tomatoes are expensive, relatively. So it's good to grow a few tomato plants, because you can pick free fruit off of there and not be spending $1, $2 a pound on it. Peppers, a good set of hot peppers could run you $2 or $3 a pound sometimes in some places, if you want really, really good ones, or if you want some for like storage over the course of the winter. One pepper plant can usually produce enough peppers, if everything's going right, to give you more peppers than you probably need at any one given time. My grandfather, at the end of the year, he'd grow rooster spur peppers through the summer. They're little peppers. They're about as big as your pinky. They start out green, they go red. They're kind of like a little chili pepper, but they just pile up onto those bushes. So what he'd wind up doing every single year is he'd take those plants, and before it got cold, right before frost, just rip them out of the ground, because he usually had them in pots at that point. He goes, hangs them up in the garage. If everything finishes ripening off in there, he can take and go sits down one day with the kids and the grandkids, and he goes through and he starts making pepper strings. If you've never made a pepper string, just take a long band of doubled over sewing thread, take a needle, and just thread it through like you're making a popcorn garland. You can just hang that up somewhere at your eyes. Anytime you need some pepper in something, you just go over, you take your hands, grab a few, crumble them up, put them in wherever you need to put them in. They're good to go. So soil preparation is part of your planning. There are two really big important things with your soil. Make sure to test your soil. Extension does it for $12 here in Rutherford County. They need a sandwich bag size sample of soil. They will test it for 3 ways, whatever you want. So if you want to test your soil for vegetable garden, fruit trees, and blueberries, they'll test your soil for all 3 of them. If you want to have your soil tested for vegetable garden, grass, blackberries, they'll test it for that. And they'll give you back a reading of your macronutrients, so your nitrogen, your phosphorus, your potassium, so your micronutrients and what you need to do to adjust your soil, bring it in line with what you want to grow. And then feeding the soil. If you want to feed your plants, feed your soil. The healthier your soil is, the healthier your plants will be. So the more you build up your soil, the better everything else is going to be. I cannot stress that enough. Organic material, for every 1% of organic material you incorporate into your ground, you double the water holding capacity of that soil. So you make it significantly better. Our soil around here in Middle Tennessee, especially Rutherford County, we're usually looking at 0.5% of organic matter in a sample. Really good soil has 5%. Awesome soil that should grow anything you want to has north of that, and it's probably almost too much. Different plants, different soils. If you're making your soils or you're doing whole bunches of different plants, keep in mind what those plants need for the ground. Some stuff needs more potassium, some stuff needs more calcium available, some things need drier ground, some things need significantly wetter soil. Mentioned lime, mentioned sulfur, gypsum, all that stuff. Best to work that into your ground in the fall, because then that winter frost and thaw of the soil takes and works it in and makes everything break up nicely. Be sure to clean up anything that you have out in the garden, so any old, diseased, or just old plants, you take and cut those off the ground or rip them out whole cloth. If they're really badly diseased, compost it, burn it, take and work it back into the ground. You got rid of all the pests. Any of that stuff works well. Just try to recycle all that great material as you can. Fertilizer, if you're feeding your soil with really good organic material and you're specifying into it what plants you need, hopefully you won't have to have too much fertilizer, but everybody needs a little something sometimes. So a little compost pile, give all your plants a little bit of health. If you're doing container gardens, if you're doing raised bed gardens, adding some compost in as you swap out plants is absolutely necessary. And it's the best fertilizer you can get because it's a whole bunch of different, easily accessible organic materials. You're not going to have big flushes of nitrogen that might burn your plants or wash off and cause an algal bloom in your pond, which is always a fun thing to have to deal with. Spacing. On your packages for your seeds are going to be all the lists of your spacings. Okay, they're going to tell you these plants need to be thinned or placed at 2, 4, 6, 16 inches. It'll have that on there for the in-row spacing. I usually recommend ignoring the row spacing, because if you're doing really tight gardening, you don't have to worry about the rows because you're using on the outside edge. And all those rows are for are for you to be able to get in and access the plants. So if you are doing several beds, you've got squash in a raised garden or a raised mound in your garden, you have squash on the other side, you may want to have those two particular raised mounds 3-4 foot apart like they recommend, so you're not in there trampling all over your vines. Determine spacing for intercropping, so we're planting 2 different things in the same place. You're going to take the planting spacing of the 2 things. So in this instance, we're talking radishes and beans. So radishes you're planting at 2 inches apart, beans you're planting 4 inches apart, add that together, that's 6 inches, and then you'll divide it by 2. So that means you're planting everybody on 3-inch centers. So bean, radish, bean. And just repeat that through what you're doing. If you're doing everything in a row, you can take and play around with this if you're doing like in square intercropping. So you're really taking square foot gardening like at most intense levels. Garden journal. I mentioned this a little bit earlier. These are really awesome things. Some of our best documentation from our founding fathers are their garden journals where they're keeping track of stuff on the farms. So this is from even more than just keeping track of what's going on in your garden. Daily, it usually covers out what the weather was, what you harvested, what pests you had, what you planted out, how you fertilized, what happened that day, anything of particular interest. Usually has notes on your plants, so what was the color, how big was the plant, when did it actually start producing fruit. And that lets you open up into being able to produce your own cultivars of seed that do well in your area the best. By keeping track of these things and keeping track of the seeds that you get off of them, or just the varieties that you're using. That way you know what does best for you in any given season. As far as pests go, that means you can get out ahead of pests. So if you know that every year, somewhere around the beginning of June, you're going to have issues with aphids on your tomato plants. You know that probably mid-May, you need to do something to control the aphids. So either get out there with some neem oil, start looking for them on the plants, and picking them off or washing them off. Maybe order you some ladybugs, or maybe find some that are somewhere already on the plant, bring them in, let them crawl off onto the plants you have. Be sure you have some of the yarrow we talked about planted around the edge, and hopefully starting to flower before then, or maybe get some borage because it flowers a little bit earlier. Get that out in there and let all that start taking and attracting things that'll pest. Where you bought your seed or your plants and how much they cost is also a good one. A couple of examples of some good garden journal pages. You can make your own. I've got a website in here where you can go download some. Planning plans. Excel can be your friend. If you're not friendly with Excel, you can use Word and their charts and their tables. That's what I made this one in. And this is pretty standard. This one is just a standard succession plan. So you put something in and later you pull something out. So on the top, I'll just show you, we'll go through the bush beans. So we put our first bush beans in April, just before or after the frost. And then they're ready by June, but in May we put out the next set. And then we just start weaving in and out. And if we have 2 or 3 additional rows that we're doing, we're keeping track of that. And then there's some things on here, like the English peas. The last of them are out in May. So you can find something like your tomato plants, where in April you're pulling out some, but then you can put tomato plants in where you have the peas. That way you're making use of that space. The spinach, the last of it we're pulling out in May, so we can take the spinach and swap it out for some squash. So figuring out when you plant stuff out, how you're planting stuff out, then lets you start taking and weaving through what you're swapping in and out in places. This is why doing it in the winter is really awesome, because you have a lot of time to just sit there and pour over, like, what can I do here and how convoluted can I make this? Some example layouts. So getting your garden plan ready for how everything is going to go and look is really important, because this gives you something to visualize, so you have something to focus on. It gives you a plan so you don't get overwhelmed. As long as you're not trying to do a really huge space really fast and beyond your comfort zone, you're able to take care of it. And then as your experience builds, you can do more and more things in larger and larger beds. Your seed labels, they're all fairly easy to figure out. Sometimes stuff is a little bit hard to find. You may or may not be able to see it, but right up here at the top corner, at this portion of the label is the date those seeds were procured and set aside. Those were in December of 2010. And they'll always have that stamped up in there. You want to try on most plants to use seeds that are from last year, at least. Here in Tennessee, whatever seed you go to buy fresh in the spring should be stamped with the previous year's date. Now, there are a lot of seeds that will hold on for a long time. Squash is an excellent example. Those seeds can be good for like 7 years of stored property. And stored property is literally as simple as a cool, dry place, AKA grandma's junk drawer. Because if you've never experienced grandma's junk drawer seed collection, the seeds that are in grandma's junk drawer almost inevitably come back easily. It's one of those things that's so uncanny that it shouldn't even happen. Because it's like, why are a bunch of seeds shoved in the back of this drawer still viable? Like, I think they've been in here since the 30s. And then it'll have other growing information on there, so it'll have like whether it's direct seeded or transplanted out normally, what its spacing is, how deep to plant it, its growing habit. So like these Cherokee Trail of Tears beans, they're pole beans, so they want to have something to grow up and hang on to. Sometimes it'll give growing tips. It'll tell you how long to expect harvest. These guys are good to go 85 days after sowing usually, and they're good for making a dry bean. So you'll take them, let the pods dry out, and you'll open them up and collect all the beans. That way you can then use them for soup or sauce mix or whatever. Crop rotation. It's really important normally for a year-by-year basis to make sure you're not planting the same things in the same places all the time, unless your soil is really healthy and you have a whole bunch of stuff growing in, but it's always better to plant this way. And then if you're really being intense with everything and doing heavy successive planting, within that year, taking and making sure you don't have too much of the same stuff following each other. Look at crop rotation, there's lots of good family selections and how to flow through. This is a really nice flow chart of kind of how to move through your garden with a pretty wide range of vegetable plants. So you've got corn, goosefoots, onion family, squashes, sunflowers, your brassicas, which are a lot of your cool season vegetables, your legumes, your nightshades, which are tomatoes and peppers. If you didn't know, we cultivated those things off things that would want to kill us. Tips for successful intensive planting. So on these, number one, make sure you have enough seed, because it can be really, really hard later in the year to find all the seed that you need for your gardens. So when in your course you're planning on how much seed you're going to need, maybe order a little bit more, because you can always save it for the next year, because with the exception of some leaf greens, most seeds viable for at least 2 years. And if you can get it cold, like really good and cold, so like down around -4 degrees, it'll last you for a while. So a mason jar in the back of the freezer works wonders. Feed the soil with compost between plantings, keep everything healthy, so keep feeding your ground, keep feeding your plants. Don't be scared to pull stuff up. If something's not doing well, if something's diseased, get it out of there before it starts causing problems with other stuff, or before you get too much time and effort sunk into taking care of a dying plant. Because we have a good long growing season here in Middle Tennessee. We have a fall planting season, we have a spring planting season. You have plenty of time to get back in there and get growing with stuff. The only things you'll usually have issues with is tomatoes, and the further on in the season you go, the cheaper the plants get and the easier it is to get them to put out roots. Because tomatoes put roots out all up and down their trunks, so you just bury the vines after you pull the leaves off, except for the tip, and then they'll throw roots out and they'll just start pounding up. You'll have some good late season tomatoes. If you like starting seeds, you can start the next crop mid-spring when you have moved out the first of the spring plantings. So lots of seeds do really well as transplants. They do much better that way. So you can start out your next run of seeds after you get your first run of seeds out. That way you have a continual line. And usually you want to start your transplants 4 to 6 weeks before you want to have them outside. So for tomatoes and peppers, we're usually talking around mid-February to have those guys started in the house, taking them and plant them. Shopping for varieties of the same crop with different maturity rates, so we can do that maturity rate succession planting. That way we have stuff coming in at different times, so we're not overwhelming ourselves. Vegetables that like cooler temperatures, get a few of those, so you have some good hardy stuff for the fall, and maybe for the spring, if you want to take a tour of doing stuff really early. Visit nurseries early in the summer, catch vegetable plants on sale, like those tomato plants I was talking about, and then planting, always planting. And whenever you think you're done planting, take a break, step back, look at everything, and then go plant some more. This is that page of resources. I'll take and leave that up, because yeah, that's pretty much my last slide. If you want to take a copy of those down. The first thing is mysquarefootgarden.net. That's the website for the Square Foot Gardening Handbook with Mel Bartholomew. The next one is the Garden Planning Tool from Mother Earth News. It is a really awesome garden planning tool because you can do any size garden, any shape you want, and it is free for the cost of signing up on their website, so they don't have to worry about too much traffic. They don't charge you anything. They don't ask you too many questions at all besides, like, what's your name and your email address. You just go in there and sign up, you've got access to it. And if you decide you really like the stuff on the web page, you can take and sign up for their magazine and start reading that. And it's got all sorts of great information in there about all sorts of good organic and healthy gardening. We are at the Agricultural Extension facilities, so I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Agricultural Extension of Tennessee. There are more publications on there than even I might be able to read in a given period of time. They cover everything. They cover lots of stuff in depth. It's all scientifically checked out because they trial it out in their test gardens. It's a good bit of information. They even have an entire publication on what I've been talking about. Hobby Farms, those garden journal pages I showed you, that's where you can find those samples at and print them off. Seedsavers.org, they're a really great heirloom seed company. They have lots of different varieties. I like them because they're fairly inexpensive. You can get a lot of seed fairly cheaply. And I have some good experience with them because we sell them at my nursery. And we sell them for the same prices as the catalog, so you don't have to worry about shipping. And if you do need seed, I will tell you a trick and a secret. Just come talk to me and let me know, and I'll try and work it in on the order. Just have to come talk to me early. And then finally, if you're doing fruit trees, I like StarkBrothers.com. They recently this year celebrated their 200th anniversary. They've been around for 2 centuries. And they started out as an old paper catalog, like the Sears Robot catalog, for those. And now they've went to online ordering. So thank y'all for listening to my hurried speech. And we're going to take and have a raffle drawing, and then once we get that done, I'll start answering questions. That way, anyone who needs to get out, we go ahead and get out.